all. I'm here with your forecast for the week of March 3rd, 2025. Wow. Okay, it's a busy week, although it's yes, it's a busy week, but really we need to orient ourselves to March. That's kind of what we have to do here in this forecast. There's some things that are happening this week that are important, but we need to orient ourselves to what's on the horizon here for the month. Not a monthly forecast, but you kind of can't not pay attention to the month because we're in the midst of it and at the beginning of it. Anyways, we're going to find ourselves in the midst of it. Well, first of all, I will, at the end, Venus is retrograde. Venus went retrograde on March 1st, Saturday, March 1st. And also this forecast, I mean, it technically begins on March 3rd, but we can't really talk about March 3rd and beyond without dealing with the weekend before, because we have too much stuff going on that will bleed over into the week. There's no reason to think that anything really begins on Monday other than the work week. And so we'll be feeling the influences of stuff that happened before that. So, right? Things they start building, they reach a peak, and then they trail off, right? You see me do this thing all the time, right? You see me do that all the time. Well, that's what we've got going on over here. We'll start with Mercury. Now, Mercury has entered the shadow of his retrograde. That happened late last week. And well, first of all, he's been for a few weeks, he's been in Pisces, where he's not really happy. It's one of his signs of debilitation. It's a little bit murky for him when it comes to communication and thinking. It's not really great for, even if you have Mercury in Pisces, it's great for a lot of things. But, as a transiting type of thing, it's not terrific. And we've probably been, let's say, we've been pre-gaming for the retrograde for a few weeks now. And then on the weekend, on Sunday, Mercury met with or meets with Neptune at the end of Pisces. And so he's already in the shadow of his retrograde where things are not going terrific, and he's in Pisces where he's not too happy. And then he meets with Neptune. So you got to figure Saturday the 1st through Monday the 3rd, at least, we have this Neptune Mercury vibe. Neptune very powerful at the end of Pisces, Mercury not able to offer much resistance. And this is like Mercury retrograde raised to a power, right? Mercury conjunct Neptune in Pisces is just confusion. Watch out for communication. This is a great time to have in-person conversations, maybe phone. Text and email, not so good. Not so good. Too easy to misinterpret. Too easy to misinterpret. Then again, it might just happen that the message gets lost. Um, but also, too, when Mercury, Neptune, it's not so much those kind of snafus that happen just because Mercury's retrograde. We'll have those too, now that he's in the shadow of his retrograde, especially. But there's a little bit more of this kind of if a story is good, you buy into it, So the critical function of thinking is that true? Are there any facts to back this up? It's kind of put by the side, and we have this kind of, nebulous. Well, that really sounds good. Let's go that way. Kind of feel to things, or it's, oh my God, that sounds terrible. Oh my God. So it's a great energy, right? The first few days of March, great energy for meditation. It's great for just, leisurely activities. It's great for getting lost in binge watch TV shows or, play music, whatever, whatever that thing is that you love to do that is kind of like fantasies and illusions and, maybe a few delusions, but don't take things too seriously. It's like you're in the fun house and there's the mirrors there, that's distorting things. Don't want to take things too seriously. Adding a little fuel to the fire on that weekend, though, and again, bleeding over Monday towards Tuesday, is the Sun square to Jupiter. Sun and Jupiter get along fine with each other, even in signs where they're not necessarily so happy. But well, the sun's okay in Pisces. It's not terrible, but Jupiter doesn't like Gemini very much. But the Sun and Jupiter always get along pretty well. And there's this sort of like inspiration, faith, we can do it kind of feel to it. Sort of, we'll pumping up the ego sometimes, or, pumping up the spirit on a better, the better iteration of it. But, we have misinformation coming from Neptune and Mercury, and then we're sort of feeling that kind of like, we can do it kind of vibe coming from Jupiter and the Sun. You could maybe act precipitously and based upon erroneous information. Watch how many times in March I say that for different reasons. Okay, so that's the first thing we have to think. And that brings me to other stuff. Makes me think about the fact that Mars, Mars went direct, ending his 10-week retrograde back on last Sunday, February 23rd. And you think, well, now things are moving forward. And indeed, things are moving forward. Martial things are moving forward. There's a little bit more flow of energy. Mars is still in the sign of Cancer, which he does not really like and does not really function very well in. Mars and Mercury don't do so well in water signs. And again, it's not that they don't do well. It's that their expression is a little different. From the point of view of the sign, it's okay, but from the point of view of the planet, it's not wonderful. Let me just stop right there. That's just Mercury Neptune talking. That's all it is. Anyway, Mars is direct, but he's in Cancer, which is it's still hard to express things or act exactly as we'd like. Defined acting. I'm heading towards my goal and I'm getting there. But here's the thing, and I have neglected to mention this, and this has been true since the beginning of the year, since about January 1st, which is when the year begins. Um, Mercury, Neptune. Mars is out of bounds, which means he's beyond the extreme that the sun ever goes in terms of being north or south of in terms of being north or south. And so the sun only gets to about 23 degrees 26 minutes when he hits the solstices, north and south. And Mars now is up above that, up in the neighborhood of 25. Anyway, why do you care? Here's the thing about Mars being out of bounds, or any planet being out of bounds. The energy is strong and it is unpredictable. Strong and unpredictable. So the Mars out of bounds energy, which is going to be all the way through to the beginning of April, is this kind of, let's just call it fierceness, if you will. There's just this strong energy, and yet, Mars is still going slow. He's in Cancer. And we got some potential for erratic stuff going on. We have a lot of potential for erratic stuff going on. The frustration builds really easily with Mars out of bounds and not able to express itself. Of course, if Mars was in a sign that he loved, if he was in Aries or something like that, and he was out of bounds, we'd have a whole other set of problems in terms of being very determined and acting and perhaps doing so in ways that we wouldn't be crazy about. But frustration builds with Mars in Cancer and out of bounds. And so some folks are going to get a little hot under the collar, right? And, sometimes me and sometimes maybe you. Uh, not going to act really poorly. We're not going to act really poorly, I'm sure. But you might really be feeling it. And it's not just anger, of course, and frustration. All of the passions run high with Mars out of bounds. But again, find expression. There you've got your issue. Okay, next thing that's up. Next thing that's up. And again, this Mars is out of bounds. This is just March. This is January through March. Mars is out of bounds. The next thing is that we're in eclipse season. Since last week's new moon in Pisces, we have been building towards the full moon eclipse next week at 23 degrees Virgo. We'll talk about that next week. but we are in the midst of building towards that eclipse, which means that things get a little bit distorted, things get blown out of proportion the way eclipses do. We don't have to worry about the actual eclipse just yet, but we are feeling that energy. The lens is starting to bend more and more as each day goes on. And so we get a distorted view. Now we've got Neptune getting towards the end of Pisces. We've got Mercury in Pisces. We got Mercury in Pisces and meeting with Neptune. We've got this sort of funhouse mirror on that side, and then we got this other funhouse mirror of the eclipses. The eclipses, perhaps more than the Neptunian stuff, the eclipses tend to show us what is important, right? It's not that we completely mistake things, which Neptune might have us do. The eclipses tend to show us what is important, and yet they do it by bending that thing way out of proportion. So we don't really know how important or what to do with it. We know we should pay attention to it, but it seems kind of like a crisis. So it's not, again, it's a different flavor of unrealistic energy, bending things out. It really becomes kind of a fun house. The fun house effect where we start to think, never mind Mercury and Neptune and wondering what's true. We're getting to the point of like, just even wondering what's real, right? Never mind, is it true? Is it real? The Letterman show, the is it something or is it nothing? There you go with a lot of stuff as we go through this week and beyond. Is it something or is it nothing? It's probably something, or maybe not. I don't know. That's the point. After he meets with Neptune, Mercury gets into Aries, and now, Mercury doesn't love Aries. He's not officially debilitated in Aries. He is officially debilitated in the other two fire signs, Leo and Sagittarius. Those are the signs of his fall and the sign of his detriment. But we will give him an honorary detriment being in Aries, as opposed to the earned detriments in the other signs. The problem with Mercury in Aries, and again, if you have Mercury in Aries, this is not about you. This is about the way we all tend to feel it when Mercury goes through Aries. With Mercury in Aries, we tend to be a little bit, see from my perspective, not really taking the other's perspective that much. Mercury does very well in the opposite sign of Libra and which is about taking the other's perspective. So in Aries, there's a little too much of that seeing things from my perspective, and words can be a little sharp, a little pointed. This is the sign of the cosmic warrior. So, yeah, you've got to be careful that things could be a little too sharp. What does Mercury do when he gets into Aries? He sextiles. He makes a nice aspect to Pluto, insofar as you make nice aspects to Pluto. That I should say, not those, that is going to be on the 5th, and that will also correspond to the Sun making a trine to Mars. I gotta feel that midweek is probably pretty good, relative to everything. The moon is going to be in Gemini Wednesday, Thursday. I feel that'll help for a lot of things, although the moon's last aspect will be a square to Neptune, so who knows? But it's probably an indication. Tuesday, if you get, especially maybe later on Tuesday, the Taurus moon is also kind of good for things. And as you go forward, Wednesday, Thursday, good. And then when we get to the weekend, the moon goes into Cancer. It's going to have to meet with Mars. This stuff going to happen there. But I don't feel that is, it's just everything that I've been saying continues on through that period of time. It's not like that's a big shift. The moon in Cancer will get us to pull inwards a little bit more, be a little bit more cautious. But with all the high energy that's going on, again, frustration is a bit of a possibility. I don't like to say that things are, not wonderful. I like to say that things are wonderful, but this is tense energy and we all kind of know it. So keep that in mind. Now, Venus retrograde starting on the first, and I talked about this a little bit last week, and then we had some questions about the way that this is likely to play out. Now, Venus retrogrades have a few interesting things that go on. Venus, in the course of 8 years, will retrograde 5 times. It's about every 18 months or so. The way that Venus retrogrades creates a really interesting pattern. It is a star pattern. And the way it happens is she jumps from, like, say, this sign over here down to this sign over here, then up to this sign over here, across to this one over here, and then down over there. I may not have done that correctly. The exact way, when like you're in elementary school, like maybe kindergarten or something like that, and they taught you to make a star, do one, two, two, like that. That's the way Venus makes her retrogrades. They trace out a star pattern, five-pointed star pattern. And then every 8 years, Venus comes back to almost the same point of the retrograde, almost the same point of the retrograde, and starts repeating the pattern again, but a little bit off from before. So the star was here, and then the star is a little bit off, and then a little bit, a little bit. I'm sure many of you remember, or you can still go out and buy one, spirograph. You trace the thing around and it would trace all these, little patterns of, shells. Well, they don't like objects. They were just geometric patterns, but they would trace them. And it was an awful lot of fun. I love my spirograph. But it's a little bit like that kind of effect. You get the star pattern repeating itself at slightly different angles as time goes on. Which means, we didn't talk about this last week, which means that this Venus retrograde resonates with the Venus retrograde that happened around March and April of 2017. Now, odds are really strong you don't remember anything about that retrograde. That's just, it probably isn't. I mean, it was a retrograde, probably nothing much happened that would really make you take notice. But there may be some resonance, not a repeat, but there may be some resonance with that time in 2017. So kind of keep that in mind. Okay. So if that was a significant period, the spring of 2017, here you are kind of revisiting it. Okay. Not repeating it by any stretch of the imagination, but maybe the resonance will simply be that you think about that. Or there could be some similarities that are in there with 8 years ago. Just throwing it out there. Somebody will say, ah, yes. I guess maybe somebody will. I don't know. Now, here's a thing. That five-pointed star shows up as it shows up in quite a few places, but it shows up in the tarot deck as the pentacle. And the pentacle is of the four suits, the pentacle is the one that is associated with the element earth. And that makes sense because Venus is the ruler of Taurus, which is the first earth sign and, arguably the earthiest earth sign in the zodiac. And Venus is also the ruler of Libra, which has a lot to do with earthly things like commerce and such. And so the pentacle, Venus traces out this kind of earthly thing. And, when we think about what Venus is about, too, Venus is about pleasure. Venus is about love and relationship. Venus is really, I know we talk about Mars and sex a lot, but, really Venus, if you remember venereal diseases back in the day. I mean, they're still around, but they're called other things now, sexually transmitted infections, but venereal, like related to Venus, so the pleasure principle. And So the earthly stuff that we would associate with sensation, right? From Jung's functions of four functions, we'd say sensation. From the four elements, we would say the earth element. And so the reason why the pentacle is there is because it is a symbol of Venus, a symbol of Venus, because of the way she stations throughout the zodiac and traces out this star pattern. And then came the whole question about Venus and the devil. Well, if you flip the pentacle around, you get the pentagram, which is, if you've seen werewolf movies and stuff like that, the pentagram is a little bit less positive. You see the pentagram in tarot on the devil card, right? It's the Venus card, it's the Venus symbol turned upside down. Now, the pentacle, if you think about it, is it's like a five-pointed star, but the tip star, it's like sort of like two legs and two arms, and then the head, going upwards. And then the pentagram, I mean, we're not talking official terms over here, but the pentagram associated with the devil has the star pointing downwards, right? Now, of the within the pentacle, the idea is this is an earthly symbol, but that fifth point is going upwards towards spirit. When we turn it around, it's going downwards towards the material. And that's why it shows up on the devil card. And the devil card, for all its, sort of horrific kind of imagery, the devil card is sort of about too much emphasis on the material. Too much. It's associated with Capricorn, and it's often the way that you interpret it reading tarot cards is that it has to do with too much work. You're working too much. You're too concerned with the material, but but just sometimes you have to work too much. Maybe it's because of concerns with the material. Maybe those concerns are very legitimate. Um, my favorite image of the tarot, the devil from the tarot, comes from the Morgan Greer deck, where the pentacle is indeed pointing downwards, but there's a candle on top of the devil's head. And that gives the image of it turns the pentagram facing downwards into a six-pointed star, becomes a Star of David, which is a symbol that brings about a harmony between the downward moving earthly triangle and the upward moving spirit triangle. And so that shows the potential for harmony, or the potential for harmony, the potential for resolution that is present in even in the devil card. It's that sort of, you could, and I think it's often been commented on that the chains around the people in the on the card are usually very loose. They could just sort of take them off and walk away if they wanted to. And that, I think, is what the Morgan Greer deck is saying in sort of a different way. Anyways, that and while we're there talking about Venus and the devil, we should point out that Venus is in modern Western astrology thought about as being the sort of lovely, beautiful, sensual, earthy, love, all these nice things. Traditionally, at least within some traditions, Venus was given a little bit more of a dark side. Now, everything has a dark side, and in astrology, we usually farm the dark side out to Saturn and Pluto, right? They're sort of the darker planets, and then somebody has to go and try to find out what's light about Saturn and Pluto and try to find the brighter side of these darker planets. But Venus traditionally came bundled with her own dark side. Venus, as we know her, the planet of love, the planet of beauty, the planet of aesthetics and values, was Venus as the evening star. But when Venus rose as the morning star ahead of the sun, the bringer of light, right? Showing the sun's light before the sun came up, she was the bringer of light. And you know how you translate bringer of light backwards? Lucifer. Lucifer, loose, light, right? The Latin, Lucifer, the bringer of light. I think bringer of light sounds pretty okay, but Lucifer, the association there is not so bright. And Venus was thought of as as the morning star was thought of as the harbinger of war. And if you look back over recent wars, we have plenty of them. You can do a fairly thorough study of them. Very frequently happen with Venus as the morning star, and Venus rises the morning star after the retrograde. So that is the darker side of Venus, the association of Venus and the devil. And it is worth thinking about. I don't think we really invest that much in it as a collective symbol anymore, so I'm not sure how strong it is. But it does remind us that during the Venus retrograde, I know I'm saying this, I know I'm saying this for the second time, but I said it last week during the Venus retrograde, stepping back from pleasures, giving something up, letting go of some of the stuff that you're really liking and you're really preferring and it feels good, and withdrawing a little bit and going inwards and not thinking or not acting so much in terms of what feels good is a good idea. And it is true that this Venus retrograde corresponds to Lent, which is, in my humble opinion, not so humble opinion, it is the fixing of Venus retrograde with respect to, well, not the calendar because Easter moves around, but it's the fixing of Venus retrograde with respect to Easter, with respect to the Christian calendar, which in the case of Easter is tied to the moon and the sun. Uh, that's a whole other story that we will not be discussing this week. Anyway, that was a little something extra. And, with Mercury and Neptune and everything like that, who knows if it's true?